All right, welcome back to the JFK Assassination Audit, video number 46. It's now 20 January. Going to keep going through book out statements here, see what we can come up with. And let's see, we left off that book out was, let's see, basically talking about he went to the lineup, and we'll get back into that. Let's see here. When the lineup was concluded, what happened next as far as you were concerned? He said, I returned to Homicide and Robbery Bureau. Was Oswald brought back there or taken elsewhere? I don't recall specifically whether he was brought back to the Homicide and Robbery Bureaus or placed in jail, but I know that I didn't interview him anymore that day. Did you have any further contact with him that day, Friday? No. Let's see, when did you next see Oswald? Well, it would have been the morning of the 23rd, so that would have been Saturday, in the Homicide and Robbery Bureau. This was another interrogation. And then he goes in, yes. Conducted by Captain Fritz. That's correct. Do you recall who else was present? And you may refer any time to reports to refresh your recollection. All right, that will be the interrogation that was in the presence of myself, T.J. Kelly of the Secret Service, David Grant, U.S. Secret Service, Robert Nash, U.S. Marshal, and Detectives Billy Sinkle and Faye Turner with the Homicide and Robbery Bureau. All right, so hold on one second. I just love how these guys that they can't recall this, they can't recall that, but they can spit out names, full names, even the middle initials of detectives that were supposedly in a room that they were talking in 6 months before. Maybe he's reading it from the report. I'm not really sure. Anyway, he said, let me see here. Did you ask any questions in the course of this interview? Yes. What were they, and what were the responses, if you recall? One specific question was with regard to the selective service card in possession of Oswald, bearing a photograph of Oswald in the name of Alec James Heidel. Oswald admitted he carried his selective service card, but declined to state that he wrote the signature of Alec J. Heidel appearing on the same. Further, he declined to state the purpose of carrying the same and or any use he made of the same. Alright, did Oswald say anything in the course of this interview with regard to obtaining a lawyer? Yes, it was in this interview that he mentioned he wanted to contact attorney App, New York City. I recalled Captain Fritz asking him if he knew App personally, and he said he did not, but he explained that he knew that App defended the Smith Act cases in 1949 and 50. And Captain Fritz asked him if he knew how to get a hold of Mr. App, and he stated that he did not know what the address was, but it was in New York City. Okay, so being me, I don't like to go over things that I don't know anything about. So I always like to dive into those things and find out what the hell is going on. Alright, so it says the Smith Act trials of Communist Party leaders, defendants Robert Thompson and Benjamin Davis with supporters. It says 1949 to 1958, 144 leaders of the Communist Party USA, violation of the Smith Act by conspiring to violently overthrow the government. So let's take a look at what the Smith Act is. Alright, so Smith Act, Alien Registration Act, popularly known as the Smith Act. Looks like it was passed. That was enacted June 28th, 1940. It set criminal penalties for the advocating the overthrow of the U.S. government by force or violence, and required all non-citizen adult residents to register with the federal government. And required all non-citizen adult residents to register with the federal government. Okay. Approximately 215 people were indicted under the legislation, including alleged communists and socialists. Prosecutions under the Smith Act continued until a series of U.S. Supreme Court cases decisions in 1957, reversed a number of the convictions under the Act as being unconstitutional. The law was amended several times. Let's see, June 28th. Okay, it looks like it was sponsored by Howard Smith, a Democrat from Virginia. Let's see, he sponsored it in 1939. This is right before World War II starts. It didn't pass the Senate until the very next year after World War II had started. Alright. It says the U.S. government had attempted on several occasions to regulate speech in wartime, beginning with the Alien and Seditions Act of 1798. During the following World War I, a series of statutes addressed a complex of concerns that included enemy espionage and disruption, anti-war activism, and all radical ideologies of anarchism and Bolshevism, all identified with immigrant communities. Congress investigations of extremist organizations in 1935 resulted in calls for the renewal of those statutes. The Foreign Agents Registration Act of 1938 addressed a particular concern, but not the general problem. Okay, God, we're going to get into a bunch of these here. A U.S. involvement in World War II seemed even more likely. The possibility of betrayal from within gained currency. The Spanish Civil War had given this possibility a name, fifth column. And let's see. And the popular press and the U.S. blamed internal subversion for the fall of France to Nazi in just 6 weeks in May and June of 1940. Patriotic organizations and popular press raised alarms and provided examples. In July 1940, Time magazine called the fifth column talk a national phenomenon. In the late 1930s, several legislative proposals tried to address sedition itself, an underlying concern with the presence of a large number of non-citizens, including citizens of countries with which the U.S. might soon be at war. An omnibus bill that included several measures died in 1939, but the Senate Judiciary Committee received in May 1940. It drew some of its language from the statutes recently passed at the state level and combined anti-alien and anti-sedition sections with language crafted specifically to help government in its attempt to deport Australian-born Union leader Harry Bridges. Who's that? With little debate, the House of Representatives approved it by a vote of 382 to 4. Wow. With 45 not voting. On 22 June 1940, the day French signed an armistice with Germany, the Senate did not take a recorded vote. It was signed into law by President Franklin D. Roosevelt on June 28, 1940. The act is referred to by its name as Principal Arthur Howard W. Smith, Democrat of Virginia, a leader of anti-labor bloc in Congress. A few weeks later, the New York Times discussed the context in which the alien registration provisions were included and the act passed. The Alien Registration Act was merely one of many laws hastily passed in the first spasm for fear engendered by the success of fifth columns in less fortunate countries. Suddenly, the European war seemed almost at our doors, and who could tell what secret agents were already at work in America? So, partly because of some such bill, it would be adopted anyway, and partly because of the step, normally distasteful, appeared inevitable. The administration sponsored the legislation. Also in June, the President transferred the Immigration and Naturalization Service of the Department of Labor to the Department of Justice, demonstrating that the federal government viewed the alien population as a security concern as war grew more likely. In mid-August, officials of the DOJ helped held a two-day conference with the state officials they called Law Enforcement Problems of National Defense. Attorney General Jackson and FBI Director Hoover delineated the proper roles of federal and state authorities with respect to seditious activity. They successfully forestalled state regulation of aliens and found state officials receptive to the arguments that states needed to prevent vigilism and protect aliens, while trusting federal authorities to use the Smith Act to deal with espionage and fifth column activities. So, we're going to get into fifth columns, but when you're looking at the definition of fifth columns, they're looking at Oswald. Okay, Oswald's going to be a fifth column, or maybe a fourth column, I believe is what they would call him. On October 13th, 1941, the United States Congress passed the Smith Act, authorizing a criminal offense for unlawful reproduction of alien registration receipt cards. Interesting. And it goes into more detail here. Not going to get into all of that. Let's see, hold on one second. Alright, and this is a definition of a fifth column. A fifth column is any group of people who undermine a larger group or nation from within, usually in favor of an enemy group or another nation, according to Harris, Malonis, and Scott Radsnitz. Fifth columns are domestic actors who work to undermine the national interests in cooperation with external rivals of the state. The activities of the fifth column can be overt or clandestine. Forces gathered in secret can mobilize to openly assist an external attack. This term is also extended to organize actions by military personnel. Clandestine fifth column activities can involve acts of sabotage, disinformation, espionage, and or terrorism, executed within defense lines by secret sympathizers with an external force. So, you know, when the FBI and Hoover and all these other people are going to be, you know, shaping the image about Oswald, they're going to shape him as a fifth columnist, basically a citizen that's working for our enemies, okay? And that's what they're trying to, the whole purpose of the Warren Commission is to focus that on Oswald. It is interesting, though, that they don't use the term nowadays, but a lot of Republicans, especially Trump, always use this term, I guess you could say, even though they don't use the term, but they're using the phraseology of a fifth column by talking about, you know, ones like Black Lives Matter. They're always talking about George Soros is, you know, funding these groups and all this kind of crap. He's some foreign influencer of money, and also he just happens to be Jewish too, which is another code for, you know, if they're Jewish, then they're probably some communist. And then you'll see these terms intersperse and interchange when they talk about fifth columnists. They talk about globalist. They're talking about nowadays, and possibly in the past too, and Jewish, Jewish money men and communists. These are all terms that are interspersed to mean all the same thing. And let's see, what else do we have here? Okay, there's Harry Bridges. All right. So we'll get back to bookout statement here. Let's see, hold on one second. So this statement right here, it said, I recall Captain Frisk asked him if he knew App personally, and he said he did not, but he explained that he knew that App had defended the Smith Act cases in 1949 or 1950, and Captain Fritz asked him if he knew how to get a hold of Mr. App, and he stated that he did not know what his address was, but that he was in New York City. So that tells you that Oswald's been educated, okay, on who the prominent lawyers are on the left, in the communist world, in the socialist world, things like that. So he's either read about him or he was told about him. Okay, hold on one second. All right, it says, I recall that Captain Fritz explained to him that he would be allow him to place a long-distance call for App, and he explained to Oswald how to ask the long-distance operator to trace him down and locate him, even though Oswald didn't even know the address or the telephone number. This is interesting because they're saying this happened on Saturday, but on Friday, App left and his office in New York and went up to some cabin that didn't have a phone, or maybe it did. But anyway, he was getting calls not from Oswald but from other news sources starting Friday night, Saturday, Sunday. His office or somebody was getting calls, and then when he checked in, he found out the news media was trying to get a hold of him because it was that Oswald was trying to get a hold of him to be his attorney, but of course Oswald got shot, by the time he got back on Monday. Anyway, of course, that would be a good reason to shoot Oswald, because if all of a sudden he's got an attorney, and the attorney says, shut the hell up, don't say another damn word until I get down there, that would be a good reason to shoot Oswald so he couldn't make that phone call. Anyway, did he actually make the call in your presence? No, he didn't make the call in my presence. The next interview that we had with him, I recalled that Captain Fritz asked him if he had been able to contact Mr. App. Oswald stated that he had made the telephone call and thanked Captain Fritz for allowing him to make the call, but actually he had not been able to talk to App. He wasn't available, wasn't in his office or something. Yeah, he was in his cabin in upstate New York. And another thing, if you think about it, if you've got a frantic, emphatic, crazed, lone assassin, why would he even bother to thank Captain Fritz for allowing him to make a phone call that he would be demanding if he was some kind of crazed person? Anyway, just making a comment there. Was he complaining about not having counsel furnished, or did he seem satisfied with the effort to reach App? Now, don't forget also, right before this, on Friday night, okay, so all this activity is going on in New Orleans. This is why New Orleans is important. This is why Garrison gets involved, because you got Bannister and Martin, or Bannister beating Martin because he makes a comment about the files and about Oswald being there and all the people going in and out. Martin's up in the hospital, tells the police what happened, but he declines to file charges. Then Martin calls the DA and tells the DA that, which says to me that Martin had a previous relationship with the district attorney. There was something, he was giving him information on other things too. But anyway, regardless of that, Martin tells the DA, Garrison's office, that, hey, David Ferry is a person that works for Bannister in this office I'm in, and they had these Cubans going in and out all summer, and Oswald was there, and that David Ferry is a pilot, and that David Ferry had left as soon as they found out about the assassination, and went to Texas and was probably going to be the escape pilot for Oswald. Okay, now that's all one other thing going on there. Another thing that's going on is that you've got this attorney, Dean Anderson, okay, who's also working with Bannister, with Ferry, with Shaw. He gets a call. He's supposed to be in a hospital. Okay, he's got the pneumonia or something. He's all up on drugs. So he gets a call from this guy named Clem Bertrand or Clay Bertrand. Not Clay Shaw, but Clay Bertrand or Clem Bertrand, okay? And tells him that he had handled certain things over the phone with him before. Supposedly never seen him, but he has a description of him somehow, which I don't understand how he can do that. But anyway, so he had handled some things for some cases for him, but he also had tried to help Oswald while he was in New Orleans that summer. This Clay Bertrand, tried to help Oswald. He sent Oswald to the office there, was going to pay him for trying to get his Marines discharge papers changed, and he was referred there by Clay Shaw. Now, Clay Shaw also started the Trade Mart where Oswald was arrested, right in front of the Trade Mart there, and I believe there's even pictures showing Clay Shaw looking at him from down the street there. But so you got all this going on. Clay Shaw calls Dean Andrews and says, hey, I want you to go to New Orleans and defend Oswald. At least give him some kind of representation. But Dean Andrews couldn't go because he was in the hospital, which I find interesting that how Clay Shaw found him in the hospital, and maybe Dean Andrews' secretary referred him there. But anyway, so Dean Andrews contacted another attorney of his, or a friend of his, and says, hey, I've got a client of mine that wants to defend Oswald. I'm in the hospital sick. Can you go to Dallas and help try to defend him? The guy said, hell no, I would never defend that motherfucking murderer and stuff like that. And then on Monday, and this is after Oswald's been killed, he contacts the FBI and says, hey, Dean Andrew told me that he had a client that was willing to pay to defend Oswald, and that Dean Andrew was sick in the hospital, couldn't go, so that's why he called me, and I said hell no, and then Oswald got shot and killed on Sunday. So they got all these things in the background going on that Oswald's not aware of and the police aren't aware of, which I find all very interesting. All right, so we go, let's see. No, he made no complaint about not being furnished an attorney. Actually, there was a good deal of conversation about that point, and he said he did not want any Dallas attorney representing him, and said that if he couldn't get in touch with Mr. Apt, that he would probably contact somebody with his Civil Liberties Union. Now, it's interesting that Bookout's saying that, because Oswald is sitting there in front of the news media saying, I don't have, do you have an attorney? No, I don't have an attorney, but I am requesting that someone would step forward to help me, like that. So he's not saying no one in Dallas, he's saying anyone. Okay. Anyway, I find that interesting. Again, you want to deny your suspect any kind of legal representation and then say, oh no, he was saying he didn't want anybody here, wasn't too concerned about it. That way you can keep him under pressure, keep him going, because everybody knows that as soon as you get an attorney in there, the attorney's going to have him shut up. Okay? Don't say another damn word. You said too much already. What did you tell them? But don't tell them anything else. That's why they want to keep that door open, because they know that if an attorney's coming, that door's closing. Maybe they can get something out of Oswald they can use to nail him. Okay? All right. It says here, let's see. I recall sometime during November 22, 23, I believe it was, the head of the Dallas Bar Association appeared at the Homicide and Robbery Bureau and requested permission to talk to Oswald. Captain Fritz gave him that permission, and when he got through talking to Oswald, he came back in and told Captain Fritz that he had seen him and that Oswald did not want anybody from the Dallas to represent him. I very much doubt that. Okay. Anyway, you heard this? Yes. That was in my presence. I do not recall the name of the attorney, but I was there at the time and during that conversation. So again, I want to know the name. If I'm defense attorney and I've got Bookout, okay, doing a deposition, or I got him up on the witness stand, okay, you don't remember the name of that attorney, but he was the head of the Dallas Bar Association. Well, that's going to be an easy person to find. So if I'm in deposition, because the defense attorney is going to have a chance to read over the deposition and question the deposition and depose Bookout before the trial. So he's going to find out this information, and then boom, he's going to ask the head of the Dallas Bar Association, did that happen? Did Oswald say he didn't want an attorney? Matter of fact, I'm going to write that down, and we're going to try to look him up there. Hold on one second. See, again, what I find is interesting about the Warren Commission is that the questions they don't ask. And of course, it's all going to be focused towards pushing the narrative that Oswald did it alone, and they're not going to be opening up doors to find other things that are going on there. Okay? So they're just going to roll over it and keep moving on with something else. So this is why Oswald needed a defense attorney. to open up those doors, to open up those questions, to follow up on those things that the Warren Commission never, ever, ever would do. Okay? So this is interesting. I just found it here. Let's see what he says. I never heard this guy before. It says, President of the Dallas Bar Association, H. Lewis Nicholas, November 23rd, 1963. So this must be right after he spoke to Oswald. H. Lewis Nicholas press conference. Let's see what he has to say. I never watched this. All right, so it looks like he just came out of there.
Nichols, Mr. Nichols is president of the Dallas Bar Association. He has been talking to Mr. Oswald, and he will make a statement for you if he desires.
My name is H. Lewis Nichols, L-O-U-I-S, N-I-C-H-O-L-S. I'm N-I-C-H-O-L-S. I am the president of the Dallas Bar Association, the organized bar here in Dallas. We have been advised that statements have been made that Mr. Oswald was unable to get any Dallas lawyer who would make any inquiry about representation, or that he was unable to get any representation here in Dallas. When I heard about that this afternoon, I decided I should come down and make inquiry as to whether or not he was represented by counsel, whether or not he desired to be represented by counsel, and whether or not he would ask the Dallas Bar Association to furnish representation to him. I have just visited with him in his cell, and he advises that his first preference is that he be represented by a lawyer in New York. His name, I believe, is John Abt, A-B-T. He then stated that if he could not be represented by that individual, he would like to have a lawyer who was a member of the American Civil Liberties Union represent him. He said that if he was unable to get anyone from that organization, why then he might call upon the local bar association to represent him. I asked him whether or not at this time he was asking the Dallas Bar Association to do anything toward representing him, and he advised that he was not, that he did not desire that we take any steps toward obtaining representation for him, and that if he was unable to obtain the other representation, he might at a later time ask us to do so, and did ask that I would check back with him at a later time to see whether or not there would be any necessity or desirability that we attempt to furnish representation for him. Having contacted him and satisfied myself that he was not being deprived of representation by an attorney, and having satisfied myself that he did not desire to be represented by a Dallas attorney, I then left, and that's the situation as it exists right now. My name is H. Lewis Nichols, L-O-U-I-S-N-I-C-H-O-L-S. He didn't discuss the details of it. I did not ask him anything. He appeared to me to be perfectly rational, and
There you
I
go.
observed no abnormalities about him at all in the short time that I visited with him. I don't know anything about it. No, I'm not. He didn't say. He didn't give any reason. I didn't ask him. I don't know. About 3 minutes. He said he had talked to members of his family this afternoon, and they would endeavor to get in touch with Mr. Abt. He said he was a member of that organization and would like to have a lawyer who was a member of that organization represent him. I don't know. Well, he appeared to be calm, and...
Is he defiant?
I didn't understand you.
Is he defiant?
Defiant? He did not appear to be defiant. He discussed the matter with me in a very rational way and very calm way, and we discussed the matter, and I satisfied myself that he knew what he was talking about and didn't desire my services or the services of any member of the Dallas Bar Association. I don't know. I did not discuss the charge with him. I do not believe so, since he is not asking for a lawyer to represent him at this time. Probably in Dallas it is.
The question was asked, may I ask it again, is it possible for this man to get an impartial jury? Would you answer that again, please?
In my opinion, it is. I think you can get a fair trial in Dallas.
And the Bar Association will help him get an attorney only if it is not Mr. Apt or the ACLU. In other words, if it is a Dallas attorney. Is that correct?
Well, I have no control over any other attorney. I have no control over any attorney except myself. It is the feeling of the Dallas Bar Association that an injured defendant should be represented. And one of the programs of the association is to furnish lawyers to represent defendants in criminal cases who are unable to provide their own attorney.
There you go.
Have you had any calls to anyone in your organization about handling this case?
I have had some inquiry about whether or not there were any Dallas lawyers representing this man, and I made inquiry and determined that apparently there are none at this time. He hasn't requested any representation. It's a voluntary bar association. The State Bar of Texas is the integrated bar. The Dallas Bar Association is a voluntary association.
How many have ever been so represented in Dallas?
I don't know.
Did you mention anybody's financial needs?
I did not. I merely asked him whether or not he desired to have an attorney appointed by the association to assist him, and he said no.
Were these calls from people in the attorney profession, or were they from citizens?
They were other lawyers that I'm acquainted with. No, so they made inquiry as to whether or not the Dallas Bar Association was doing anything to see whether or not this man could obtain local representation, and I decided I'd find out.
Local members who called?
I have not talked to any attorneys at all. I do not practice criminal law, and I've never tried a criminal case, so I don't know the answer now.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Mr. H. Lewis Nichols, the president of the Dallas Bar Association, returning from a visit to the fourth floor jail cell of Lee Oswald. He has just conferred with him there and says that he is satisfied Oswald is able to obtain counsel.
I just wanted to say something real quick. Did you notice the flicker rate on this guy? He's just going off the charts. So he's extremely nervous about something he's seeing or hearing. But his statement is that everything seems to be normal. Anyway, so just to summarize what Mr. Nichols said right there, okay, and we're going to compare that again to what Bookout said, okay? And Mr. Nichols is saying that Oswald wants to be represented by this attorney in New York named Apt, okay? Again, we went over Apt's not available. He won't even get back to New York until Sunday night, Monday morning. Okay, by then Oswald's dead. Okay? And Mr. Nichols also says that he wants to be represented. He told him he wanted to be represented by Mr. Apt. And if that's not possible, okay, that's option A, then to be represented by someone of the American Civil Liberties Union. That's option B. And then if that's not available, then an understanding attorney in the Dallas area. Okay? That is a subtle but extreme difference between what Bookout is saying. Okay? See, Bookout said, he stated he did not want any Dallas attorney represented him. And that's not what he just told Mr. Nichols. That's not what Mr. Nichols just told him. So we've got another lie from Bookout, a very subtle lie. It's not that Oswald's not saying he didn't want a Dallas attorney. He's just saying he prefers this Apt or someone from the American Civil Liberties Union. And if those aren't available, then he'll go for an attorney in Dallas. Another thing I just remembered is that his brother, Robert Oswald, was trying to get him an attorney, okay, was contacting lawyers So whatever happened to that? I remember specifically Robert Oswald saying that. Another thing that's really interesting, so by this time he's already been arraigned in court. Okay, maybe they did this back in the 60s, but I know nowadays the case would be completely thrown out if Oswald didn't have any representation and he went before a judge and he made his, you've been charged, because Oswald would have gone before a judge. That's my understanding. Okay, and remember he said that there was a sweet, short, appearance before a judge, and he didn't know he had been charged. He was charged with killing a policeman, but not the president, and the guy says, oh, you've been charged. Oh, we've been charged. He really hadn't been charged for like another 45 minutes. So, I don't know about the 1963. Maybe this is one of the cases that changed that. But I know, especially in Portland, they have a group called the Metro Alliance Public Defenders, or Metro Public Defender's Office, or something like that. And it's like the District Attorney's Office, except it's public defenders for people who don't have an attorney representing them, okay? So if the police want to bring him before a judge, or the district attorney wants to bring him before the judge and charge him, or do a bond hearing and hold him over, he's got to have some kind of representation there. I don't know about back then, but nowadays, I know especially in Portland, you could easily get that case thrown out if he had to go before a judge. Matter of fact, a judge would know all this and would never, ever allow it to happen. He would say, hey, where's this man's attorney? Well, I'm sorry, you're going to have to take him back to jail and until his attorney shows up, because he can't represent himself in my courtroom because of all these cases, and he would start listing off these cases that would get the whole fucking case thrown out. And then he would scold the district attorney saying, hey, and I know that according to this law and that law and this case and that case, that this whole case would get thrown out. So if you want to, shoot yourself in the foot, just try that shit again. Okay. So maybe this is before all that happened, but again, we've got Bookout saying that Oswald didn't want to be represented by anybody in Dallas, which I kind of agree with. I wouldn't want to be represented by anybody in Dallas, But so there's efforts going on. You got Shaw and Dean Andrews trying to get a lawyer from him from New Orleans. Then you've got his brother Robert trying to get an attorney for him. And I don't know what happened with that situation. Maybe I should find out. You got App being contacted, trying to be contacted by Oswald. Okay, Oswald's also talking to Mrs. Payne to try to contact App. Okay. And we'll go over her testimony where she says that he asked her to try to contact App or any lawyer. I believe it was any lawyer. Okay. And because we'll go over that later. And then, let's see here, what else do we have? And then you've got Nichols here saying that he's wanted to be contacted by the American Civil Liberties Union. So I find it interesting that Bookout could change it and say that Oswald, I'll just read it again from his own words, did not want any Dallas attorney representing him, which is not really a bold-faced lie, but it's definitely, it's like 42 inches and 27 inches and 42 inches and 27 inches. Okay? Anyway, I find that interesting. All right, so we're going to move on again, and we'll go back to our espionage terms here. Hold on a second. All right, so we'll keep going down the espionage terms here. So we've got music box, slang for clandestine radio. Now they have these shortwave radios, okay, that the Russians would have, or we would have, or somebody would have, and they can pick up shortwave transmissions from around the world, okay. And they had the Russians, I don't know about the Americans, I'm pretty sure we probably did the same thing, but the Russians had these things called one-time pads, okay. And basically it was like sticky notes, okay. But each sticky note was for each day, or whatever the set of days, every third day, or whatever the day the next message, you're supposed to go over. and there were only 2 of them. So you had one, and the transmitter in the center had the other one, okay? And so your message would be sent out for that one message. No one else would have that pad, the one-time pad. And every time you use one of the message pads for that day, you destroy it, burn it, flush it down the toilet, and then the next message would be on the next pad. So the codes would be different. So, you know, the music box would be the clandestine radio that would be playing. Okay, so you'd listen to that in your basement or at night or something like that, and they would say, you know, I'm sure we've heard all these things, you know, the door is ajar. The door is ajar. The door is ajar. Like that. And they'd say it 1, 2, 3 times, whatever. And then, you know, you'd have other codes like, the teddy bear is on the loose. The teddy bear is on the loose. They'd say it about 3 times, okay, to make sure that you got it, because sometimes there's static and there's crackles and stuff like that. So they usually say it about 3 times. Or they'd say something like, the pen is blue. And it's usually 3 words, okay? And those are usually like letters, or each word represents a different word or something like that. And then, once you wrote that down, you would use your one-time pad, okay? And so if you, let's see. Hold on one second. Alright, so let's say you're Oswald, okay? And you're getting your message from headquarters, whatever. And so they're sending out a message to you to go do this, go do that. Or we can flip it and say Marina, okay, is getting messages from her radio. Now, another thing that people don't think about, why would Oswald, if he loves Marina, wants to be with Marina, you know, why would he be living separately? Okay. So there's a good way to do that, is to think that maybe he figured it out that Marina was being too nosy and getting involved in whatever he was doing, okay, and maybe he started to have suspicions of her that he couldn't trust her. So he decided to separate himself from her so he could get his coded messages, you know, from whoever he was getting them. And then she went along with it because she was getting her coded messages through her little radio. Now, these little radios don't need much. You can sit in there at night, you know, under your blanket with your little headphone, and then that plugged into a line into your, you know, your radio, and your little one-time pad, and write these things down. And it doesn't take much to hide these things. You could take them and take a corner from the wall or something like that, or electric socket, and hide these radios behind there with the one-time pad. Maybe hide the one-time pad someplace else. Back then, the police weren't sophisticated enough, like the FBI, to know that of secret compartments. You could, you know, there's a space between the walls that they put insulation. Well, a lot of these ceilings have little gaps at the top that you could push up. I saw one guy had he would take a magnet and then tie his radio with another magnet, and then he would take the radio up to the gap, and then put the magnet on there, and then drop it down between the sections of the wall. And then when he needed it, he would take his string and run it like a fishing lure down through the gap in the wall, and then the magnet would pick up the radio, then he would bring it up, and no one would ever know to look there. Okay, all they would find is a piece of string with a magnet on the end, maybe sitting in his drawer somewhere. But a one-time pad basically is an encryption technique that cannot be cracked, but requires the use of a single user pre-shared key that is not smaller than the message being sent. In this technique, a plain text is paired with a random secret key. Then each bit or character of the plain text is encrypted by combining it with corresponding bit or character from the pad using modular addition. Okay, so let's take a look at a one-time pad. Okay, so I wouldn't know how to use this one, but this is the U.S. one. The U.S. ones always seem to be a little bit more complicated than the Russian ones. The Russian ones are very simplistic, but very, very hard to break. But so you've got, okay. Okay, so here's the cipher, okay. That's the cipher there, and here is the break, okay. So if you've got L, you go down to L, and then you go across, and depending on the day, or depending on the code that you got, okay, it would be another letter here that you could pick out. There's various ways of working them. The Russian ones, basically, the code would switch every day. A lot of people, I don't know if you've ever heard of this, that people would use books. A lot of people used to do this, send secret messages to people in prison by sending them a book. Okay, and then what you would do is, let me see, hold on a second here. So you type up, okay, so say your message would be, hold on one second, let me just type this up. Alright, so this is how it would work, okay. It'd be something like this. So if you had a message that you want to get to a person, you break it down to the smallest amount of characters that would make sense. So you'd say breakout BO 122, or let's see, hold on, 11/22, that would be the date, and then 3 p.m. at night, okay, south wall. Okay, so what you would do, and we'll just use this text here, you'd take your book, and then you would go through and look for a letter B. Okay, so B, right there. You'd put a dot below the B. Then the next one would be an O. O, right there. You put a dot below the O. And then 11, that one's going to be a little harder to find. Okay, there's a 1, and maybe you put 2 dots there, and then a 2, you put 2 dots there, and then a 3, you put 1 dot, and then a P, right there, you put another dot, and then south, S, you put a dot there, wall, and then let's see, anyway, you get the idea, right? So if a guard looked at the book, they would look through to see if there was a gun or something written or a note or something in it. They would go through and they wouldn't notice these dots. I'm sure nowadays they're trained to look for the dots. But that's the way you do it. And then they'd have to know to look for the dots, so somehow you'd have to get some kind of message to them to look for the dots. But once that's in place, you could write whole fucking novels in there, okay? Write entire pages and pages of information by just simply using a book and dots underneath it. Okay, I believe the Manson, I remember reading about this in Helter Skelter, that the people, you know, what are that creepy, whatever her name was, Squeaky Fran was communicating with Manson that way by putting dots in books and stuff, and they, oh wow, Manson sure does read a lot. Yeah, he reads a lot. But that's a way to do it, okay? So that's one code, and that's one way to send messages. The one-time pads are a great way to use it. You can destroy the one-time pad. You know, even if you accidentally, the police found the numbers, the cipher numbers, they would have no way of translating what it meant, okay? Because you need the one-time pad to do that. And so what Oswald would do is hide that one-time pad somewhere, most likely not at his residence, most likely not at Mrs. Payne. If he's smart, he'd curl it up, put it in that photo can, okay, and then leave it at his post office box. He would leave it, by the railroad tracks. He'd leave it at his cemetery. He'd leave it someplace that he knows that no one's going to look and it's not going to be destroyed and constructed over. And then he could go back, boom. He'd leave it in the library. You could easily take a one-time pad and put it at the bottom of the shelves, a little space there. No one would ever look. Okay? Matter of fact, I think the library would probably be the best place to do that. But if Oswald's getting his messages or his coded messages, he could even use it, with his cipher to put a message in at the post office box. So he writes in code with his one-time pad, puts it in the post office box. Some guy comes by, grabs the message, leaves another one. Oswald takes that one. He goes back, decodes it at the library with his one-time pad for that date. And then new instructions. Okay. Marina could be doing the same thing. Okay. A great thing to discourage people to investigate you or look into you more and not take you seriously is either to act really, really ignorant and stupid, or to act really, really, really crazy. Okay. I used this technique a couple of times when I was in places that were pretty dangerous. So, like when I was in Houston, I used to do collections for this bottled water company. They had these machines, and the bottled water machines, and they're worth like $300 a pop, So what would happen, we'd start with a business, and then they would take that and they would move someplace else, or they would just leave it there. A new tenant would come in, they would take over the machine. Okay. One time I was always good at tracking down these guys. I tracked down these guys to a location in South Houston. It's not the most safest place in the world, and I went in, and it was obvious that it was it was gang members, and it was a chop shop. They were chopping up cars and selling them and stuff like that. And me, of course, I look like I can't get away from it. I look like a cop. I look like an FBI agent no matter where I go, especially when I wear my sunglasses. So I come walking in, and of course all the faces turn around and are looking at the white guy who looks like a cop walking in the door. And I'm like, oh, hi y'all. Oh, and I see the bottled water cooler. Okay, so the one thing you want to do, unless you want to have a confrontation all the time with someone, is to either overwhelm them with force or to underwhelm them the threat. Okay, so I underwhelmed them with the threat by pretending like I was really stupid and ignorant. I go, oh, hi y'all, I'm from Texas Premium Water, and we just got to get that water cooler there. You guys moved and we don't know where you're at. You guys won't continue the water service? And they're all looking at me like, no. And I'm like, okay, well, let me go ahead and get the water cooler. You can keep the water jugs, no problem. But we'll just go ahead and get that, and we'll just get that out of your way. That way you won't get charged for it, okay? Because those things are about $300, $400, and you might get charged. And we don't want you to get an unnecessary charge, okay? So you play like Gomer Pyle. You act really stupid, okay? So this is how I think that Marina was acting around Mrs. Payne. Oh, I'm just this innocent girl who doesn't speak a lick of English, and I just speak Russian, and I don't know anything, and I don't know what's going on, and da-da-da-da-da. And then when Mrs. Payne goes to the grocery store and goes shopping or whatever she does and goes out, she's not working, so who knows how she's paying for everything. Maybe when Mrs. Payne goes off to meet with her handler in the FBI or the CIA, Marina goes and pulls out her little one-time pad and listens to her radio, because those transmissions can either be set for a specific time or they can just go continuously for a whole day or so. Okay? So, and then she'd write down those messages, and Mrs. Payne wouldn't know any better. All she'd see is some, a bunch of numbers or a bunch of letters. She wouldn't know. And it'd be in Russian, and she's still learning Russian. Okay. you know, I've also known or read about people that use other languages. So instead of using Cyrillic, they could have used Chinese symbols. They would have taught them Chinese symbols, or they could have taught them whatever to write those down, and then those symbols would mean something else. Okay, pretty simple, but it's not very complicated, but everybody, especially the Russians, use them. And nowadays they just use like electronic scrambling messages, but if you want to go back to old school, it's a very good, safe way to use to pass messages and stuff. All right, so musician, okay, we did that one. Naked, a spy operating without cover or without backup. Now, in Oswald's case, I can't think of anybody that would be naked. They would always be covered. But maybe Oswald didn't know it, but he ended up being naked. Okay? He thought he was being covered. He thought he had backup, but all that just disappears after the assassination. This is why he's keeping quiet and not saying, yeah, I did it and stuff like that, but demanding a lawyer, because that lawyer, he's going to use that lawyer to get a hold of his whatever, his here, when you get out of the jail, go call this number and tell him the moose is on the loose, a code word or something like that. And that would mean that Oswald is in jail and plans didn't go according to the way it should have. You know, same thing with that cutout when he tried to call that Raleigh number. That would have been another indication. See, that's another indication that Oswald was either involved in some kind of intelligence, FBI, or I tend to believe that Oswald wasn't working with the FBI because the FBI wasn't aware of him. Okay, it doesn't seem. So maybe he was working for some kind of other security agency, maybe even military intelligence, naval intelligence. You know, it wouldn't be unheard of for military intelligence to be operating inside the United States. I mean, they were following Martin Luther King around, you know. So why wouldn't they be involved in these other activities? Maybe this military intelligence group, okay, that he thought he was working with, that they had convinced them that, hey, you did a great job in Russia. Here, you want to keep serving your country, and you know we can give you some extra money to pay off that loan to the government. Keep doing this, reporting back, and this is why Oswald's acting like a soldier in New Orleans. He's standing like a soldier. He's calling his cutout to let him know, you know, this guy in New Orleans or Raleigh, to let him get a message to his commander that things went wrong. Okay. Anyway, keep going. Let's see. NSA, National Security Agency, or no such agency, branch of the U.S. Department of Defense responsible for ensuring the security of American communications and for breaking into communications and other countries, no such agency. So that was Snowden. Snowden wasn't really working for the NSA. He was working as a contractor for a contractor, Booz Hamilton or something like that, who was operating this station out in Hawaii out there that was listening to all this Asian Pacific communication. And you know, Snowden is, if he ever gets caught, should either be executed or should never ever get out of prison, because all of the, you know, it's one thing to be against your government eavesdropping on what you think is the privacy of people, okay? But it's another thing, you know, it's another thing to go to an enemy country and give them up all that information. That is completely two different fish. You know, if you don't like what was happening, quit. Go to the news media after you quit and tell them briefly what was going on. But he tells the Russians everything. Every single thing. So we spent millions of dollars, lots of human resources, people's lives at risk. People died because of what, you know, the Russians were able to get from Snowden. People were executed and careers were destroyed, and he's no hero. Okay, he's no hero at all. Okay. Yeah, the government, you know, does bad things. Okay, the government does things they shouldn't do, but there's certain things, certain ways to handle that. Okay, especially if you sat there, and to me, as a American, as a man, to sit there and sign those documents saying you would never, ever, 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 ever give up the secrets you're going to learn. It says his word isn't worth shit. Okay. And the Russians think the same thing about him. They have no respect for him. They don't like, you know, they like the information, and they'll pretend like they're his friend, but when he's not looking, he's just a big pile of shit to them too. Okay? Anyway, so nugget, a British term for bait, money, political asylum, sex, or career opportunity offered to a potential defector. Well, a nugget for Oswald, if you think about it, would be, okay, you're going to be, you're going to go to prison. You did these things, you punched an officer, you disobeyed orders, stuff like that. So you're going to go to prison. So a bait, a nugget would be a way of getting Oswald, look, you go to Russia, you do this little mission, when you come back, everything's good. No stain on your record, okay? This is why Oswald's so obsessed with changing his record, okay? Because they didn't tell him that they were going to change it, okay? And see, this is another way of controlling someone, okay? So if you give them a bad record, then it's just, you can keep throwing that nugget out there. Hey, well, look, yeah, well, we weren't able to control that because you didn't show up for your reserve duty for that 1 year after you got out. But look, this is what we'll do. You work these right-wing groups here in New Orleans or in Dallas, and we're going to work on getting that fixed for you, okay? You know, it's a two-way street here. You give, we give, okay? So this is the way it works. We appreciate what you did in Russia, but you're going to have to do a little more, okay? And then that would get extended out. So it's constant bait, constant little nugget. You know, you got that fish out there, and or your dog, and you got that treat. Come on, dance, dance. Come on, flip, dance, jump, beg, roll over. This is what they're doing to Oswald, okay? They're doing the same thing to Ruby also with his taxes. Yeah, we'll help you with your taxes, but Ruby, you just got to, you know, run this information, do this, act like that. That's what they're doing with Ruby also. Of course, the KGB is doing the same thing with Marina. You know, go to America, enjoy your life, but, you know, your parents are over here, your mother's over here, your brother's over here. You know, you want them to have a good life, want them to not starve, not freeze during the winter, make sure they have gas. So we want you to continue to work for us, okay? Because if you stop working with us, then, you know, somehow the gas won't get delivered to your grandmother for a house, and she'll freeze to death in those harsh, cold Moscow winters, okay? So we want you to keep performing. That's the nugget. Nursemaid, Russian term for security service officer who accompanies delegations to other countries to prevent anyone from defecting. Well, you see, again, those are going to be people, they're going to have, first of all, they're going to, you know, like I was mentioning before, they're going to bring up pictures of their daughter, pictures of their son, pictures of their family, their mother, their grandma, and put them in front of them and say, look, you're going to go to Moscow, you're going to go to our embassy in D.C., Washington, D.C., America. It's a choice gig. You'll be there for 2 years. Enjoy yourself over there. Eat a lot of good food, drink a lot of good American wine, watch a lot of good American movies and John Wayne and all that kind of stuff. But don't you fucking dare think about betraying us or defecting or giving the Americans anything, okay? And because we're putting our trust on you, and, you know, you may not believe in the Communist Party, but you definitely believe in your family, okay? And of course, this is your grandma, this is your mother, this is your dad. Your dad's got that heart problem, you know. Your mom's got that new job. Your grandma's trying to get that new housing because, you know, the old rickety housing she's in now, it's cold during the winter. Here's a picture of your brother. He's trying to get into university from the military. He's got one more year left, but, you know, things happen. Kids get blown up with, you know, because they're clumsy. And here's your, you know, your little sister. She's trying to get on that team in high school. Just remember, we can do anything with these people, okay? While you're over there, always keep that in the back of your mind. You know, your mother could get ran over in the middle of the street. It happens all the time. People are clumsy. They don't watch what they're doing, and boom, a car comes along and kills them. We'd hate for that to happen to your mother. Your dad, he's got heart problems. It would be a shame that he'd have a heart attack at such a young age of 55. Your brother, he's almost out of the military. It would be a shame if he accidentally fell off a roof, fell out of a ditch, got run over by a tank, all these things. So they're going to lay it out real clearly, psychologically, in their mind, what's going to happen if they fuck around, okay? They've also done a background check. A lot of these people are not going to be able to go over there unless they're part of the Communist Party, and proving their whole family is going to have to prove their loyalty. You're not going to have any czarist granddaughters going as a secretary to the embassy in the United States. All right. Okhrana, the secret police under Russian czars, 1881 to 1917. Now, the thing that's funny about the secret police is that they serve whoever's in power. Now, a lot of them defected, but a lot of them just turned around and said, hey, you know, you're the new power in our country. We serve the people of Russia, so you're our new boss now. Here, this is what we do. This is why we're important. Don't kill us. Okay? A lot of these guys would have gone to prison, but some of them just turned right around and started working for the enemy. Okay? All right. One-time pad, we just went over that. Strings of random numbers for singular use as a key in enciphering messages. The proper use of a one-time pad renders a message mathematically unbreakable. So it's basically, even computers can't break it down. OSINT, OSINT, the open source intelligence information derived from publicly available sources. So I guess what you could say, what I'm doing here is OSINT. I'm not revealing any top secret information that's classified and is held in some office file somewhere. I'm just going off what's on the internet. That's open source. Everything I'm reading and showing you is open source. Okay? All right, the OSS, Office of Strategic Services, U.S. World War II Intelligence, Sabotage, and Subversion Organization. Oh so secret, oh such snobs, oh so social. All right, parolees, passwords to identify intelligence personnel to each other. Okay, so everybody, they've all heard this, you know. I heard, what's his name? I can't think of his name real quick. Anyway, so it would be a word that if you're meeting someone, you've never met them before, it would be a password that you would know. So you'd be sitting down the bench, pretending like you're reading your newspaper, and you'd say, oh, the weather, the geese are flying south for the winter. And then the person was supposed to respond back with yes, but, you know, there's snow in the forecast or some other word like that. And if they don't, you know, come back with the right password, then, you know, you got the wrong person. And you want it to be some kind of statement that if you are mentioning it to the wrong person, or maybe a counterintelligence agent that sat down in their place, that it wouldn't be an obvious password. Okay? So that's what you want to do. That's how you do it. Another thing that's interesting is you can use symbols, cards, dollar bills, things like that. And that it's interesting that in Oswald's possessions, that when he was arrested at the Texas School Book Depository, matter of fact, I'm going to write this down to verify this, that half of a playing card and a half of a like a $10 bill or a $5 bill was found in his wallet. Okay, so if you're meeting with a contact, what you would do is, or someone you've never met before, okay, maybe it's an extraction officer, okay, someone who's going to exfiltrate you out of the dangerous situation. You've never met this person, but your handler would give you the torn half of a playing card. Say the I don't know much about cards, but the King of Spades or something. They tear it in half, okay, and he would give you one half of that card. Say, hey, when you meet your contact, he's going to have the other end of the card, and he'd hold that up that I'm going to give him, and then you match it together, and it should match, and that'll be your contact that's going to exfiltrate you out of the country. I'm going to give him the other one. If that guy doesn't have it, shoot him, run like hell. That's the wrong guy, okay? That's not the right guy, okay? So hold on one second. And if you are arrested, like Oswald was, the police are not going to know what the hell this is. Maybe the FBI will, but it's not going to mean much to them. They're just going to note it, okay? But I made a note of that to find out if there's a playing card there. Hold on one second. Let's see. Pattern: the behavior and daily routine of an operative that makes his or her identity unique. So, okay. So, you remember I mentioned Eli Cohen, okay? He had this routine that he went through. He would go around during the day, talk to his contacts, his business people, and then at night he would be on the little hammer there, coding back what he found out. And the thing that's dangerous about a situation like that is if you become too routine, you're easy to entrap. Okay, you're easy to be found out what you're doing, because then the counterintelligence is like, oh, okay, it's 8 p.m., you know, Eli Cohen must be tapping out his information. So what you want to do is you want to eliminate your pattern. You want to vary your pattern, okay? I used to do this when I would run, okay? And so I ran, let's see, I ran on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sunday. Pretty regular. That's a pattern, okay? And in the morning, 5 o'clock. But I had, that's 4 different runs. I had 5 different routes, okay? So only I knew when those routes would go. So I might take the north route one day, the south route the next day, west, east, like that. But that would go in 5 different ways, okay? So every Monday, I wasn't running the same route and things like that. So I would vary my routine. The reason I did that, not that I lived in a bad neighborhood, but if you do, I would suggest you do that. But just in case someone decided to case my apartment, my condo, and decide I was a mark, and hey, you know, this guy goes running every day at 5 o'clock in the morning, and we can knock him, you know, jack him, knock him over the head, grab his key, and then get back to his house, steal everything he's got, and by the time he got back home, once he was 5 miles out, and called the police and stuff, we'd have all this shit. People do think like that, and they do watch, and believe me, this is why, even though you're not involved in intelligence, just for safety, you want to vary your routine, okay? You want to come in at different times. You want to come in at different angles, park in different areas. Don't always park in the same damn spot unless you absolutely have to. vary your routine, because that's going to ensure your safety. The more variables there are, the more, because believe me, criminals aren't the smartest guys, so the more confusing you make it for them, the more difficult it is for you to become a mark. And the same thing in intelligence, the same thing with Oswald. You see how Oswald varied his routine. He had some things that were similar, but you see how when he was coming back, he changed his routine to throw off any kind of person follow him. So he went up Elm Street, away from his apartment. He got on the bus 9 blocks away, went down, got off the bus, went over a couple of blocks south to the bus station, got in a cab, rode in the cab down past his apartment or his room to rent, 2 blocks, got out, walked back up. So that's called varying your routine. That's an intelligence technique, okay, to cover yourself from being followed. Because if you were part of this assassination plot, or if you were trying to thwart the assassination plot, or you're trying to infiltrate the assassination plot, but it goes on anyway, even despite all your warnings, then something's not right, okay? And something is telling you that I'm going to have to vary my routine because the gig is up. All right. So we're going to stop here, and we'll pick it up again tomorrow. I'm going to do some research about Robert Oswald, trying to get him an attorney and this playing card, and see what we come up with. All right. Hold on one second. All right. No, actually, that's it. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.